Hello and welcome back. We're going to continue with cell injury and we're going to focus on the different adaptations that can happen as a result of a cell being injured, whether it be by ischemia, hypoxia, whether it be by hydropic swelling or intracellular accumulations, or other etiologies can be associated with cells that adapt over time, okay? So essentially what you've got is a change to the internal function of the cell, okay? So when we're talking about change, things like size, cell number, cell function can be another reason. Or the type of cell, okay? Typically what ends up happening you get a change in gene expression, okay? So when I say gene expression, because you all did well in intro bio, you should be thinking about transcription, okay? So you're changing how the DNA within the cell is expressed via transcription. With that transcription, all right, you've got new RNAs that are made. You get a change in translation, okay? So transcription, you should be thinking RNA, translation, proteins, okay? Again, this is most often, doesn't have to be exclusive though, okay? In this case, with cellular adaptions, these also can be reversible. All right, the first one I'm gonna concentrate on, oops, I can spell, I really can, is atrophy. Typically, atrophy is lack of use. Think about a broken arm, right? You've broken a bone, you've gone to the doctor has cast that so that it gives the bone time to heal, but you're not using that arm. By not using that arm, the muscles are going to atrophy, okay? Meaning you're going to have a smaller cell size associated with this, in this particular example, with the muscle. Okay? Now this is reversible because once that cast comes off, you can do exercises to build that muscle back up. Okay? But extended lack of use, as with people when they get elderly, right? They tend to sit more, they'll stay in bed more, their muscles will atrophy. It gets harder as you get older to recover from that. All right? So in this case, lack of use or disuse is the example. It's not the only one, okay? You can also have atrophy associated with cells if there's a problem with the innervation. So again, I'm going to use muscles as the example. If you have damage to a nerve, say in the brachial plexus, which is in the shoulder, and you aren't getting the muscle innervated, so it's not getting that signal from the brain to move or to move properly, the muscles again are going to be smaller, okay? So that would be another example. Atrophy, I should put this in as well. Nutrition. All right, because if you remember from another video, I talked about how nutrition can, or poor nutrition or lack of nutrition can lead to cell injury. That can lead to atrophy. So with diseases like rickets in the bone, if you aren't getting enough vitamin D, you aren't getting calcium to move into the bones are weak, okay? Aren't forming the way they normally should. They aren't getting that calcium deposited, okay? Ischemia could be another reason for atrophy. So there are a lot of reasons that can cause it. The overall result is the same. The cell that's affected is going to get smaller, okay? So atrophy, anytime you see A in front of it, it typically means a lack of something. In this case, a lack of use with atrophy. Okay, in contrast, hypertrophy, hyper means you've got an increase in something, okay? So you've got an increase in cell size, okay? Again, if you lift weights, right, you're building up that muscle, the muscle's gonna hypertrophy, it's gonna get bigger. That's a normal process, all right? So a skeletal muscle, maybe this is normal. But if we pick on another muscle, like the heart, right? If the heart is pumping harder than it needs to, or for other reasons, results in an increase in size, the efficiency of how that heart pumps goes down, okay? And that can lead to disease processes that you'll cover in Patho 2, okay? So you've got an increase in the size of the tissue, the heart in this case, okay? So that's kind of my example for hypertrophy. You've got an increase in cell size. Maybe I should label these. We got 1 for atrophy, 2 hypertrophy, okay? So the trophies go with cell size. Atrophy smaller, hypertrophy bigger, okay? To focus on another hyper, we could have hyperplasia. This one is an increase in cell number. So essentially, you're talking about an increase in the cellular process mitosis. Cells are dividing, okay? So again, hyperplasia can fall within a normal range. If you cut your skin or have an abrasion on the skin, right, the cells of your skin are going to start to divide, undergo mitosis to heal that wound. So that might be a normal example, okay? But you can have things that are abnormal, okay? The body is adapting to a change in the environment. Well, maybe I shouldn't necessarily call this entirely abnormal, but if you go to the top of the Sandia Mountains, right, you're increasing your altitude. Because of that increase in altitude, oxygen levels are lower, okay? So what'll happen, you'll get, if you stay at the higher elevation for a longer time, you're going to get the number of red blood cells circulating to increase. So that if you've got more red blood cells, those red blood cells can carry more oxygen to make up for the fact that at the higher altitude, you've got less available oxygen in the atmosphere, okay? So that might be an example of hyperplasia, okay? You could also have hyperplasia with things like friction, right? Calluses on the skin are where, if you do repetitive motions, that skin will thicken. That's another example of hyperplasia associated with the skin, all right? So these are more physiological, okay? And with hyperplasia then, another one that can come under abnormal is with disease processes like cancer, okay? Cancer cells are dividing when they're not supposed to. Now we'll get to, in the cancer section, how the body can respond to this, because you'll normally have some cells that'll miss some cues, and normally the body has some mechanisms to prevent that cell from over-proliferating, okay? Proliferating. And by that I mean undergoing cell division, okay? So hyperplasia, you've got an increase in cell number. Another type of change in cell you can have is metaplasia. Also tends to be associated with cancers, although it doesn't have to be exclusive, all right? With this one, you get one cell type that's replaced by a different cell type, okay? And so with metaplasia, essentially what you've got is, again, and I'm going to put this up here because I ran out of space down there. Typically is a change in gene expression. So a great example of this, if you have acid reflux or GERD, what ends up happening, that stomach acid is exposed to the esophagus. Now, the stomach is uniquely adapted to deal with the highly acidic environment within the stomach. The esophagus is not. So when you get that stomach acid hitting the stratified squamous epithelial cells, okay, you get the cells to change function. It'll no longer look like a stratified squamous epithelium. It may not look exactly like stomach cells either, okay? But because of the environmental change of that stomach acid associated with a tissue that's not supposed to see a highly acidic environment, you get a change, okay, associated with that. And typically, the change is there to prevent cell damage. But in changing that cell type, you're changing the function, all right? And that can lead to various pathologies. Eventually, that metaplasia can lead to things like hyperplasia, and the next one, dysplasia. And you can have cancer that results from that, okay? So metaplasia, we're talking about a change in gene expression, all right? Last one, and I know this video is a little bit longer than some of the others, and I'm talking a lot, but that's okay. With dysplasia, this one, you've got disordered cell growth, okay? So what you may have are cells piling up. Okay? The key with these, hyperplasia, metaplasia, dysplasia, aren't yet malignant, so they aren't yet cancer. They're kind of like the first set of changes leading to cancer, all right? But essentially what you've got with dysplasia, you get cells that are disordered as far as their growth. They start to look abnormal, and this can be seen in things like cervical cancer, colon cancer. All right, the cells just aren't behaving the way they're supposed to. All right, and you can have a level of hyperplasia and dysplasia going on at the same time. So those cells are disordered potentially because they're dividing when they're not supposed to. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Our next video, we're going to talk about now the irreversible types of cell injury. Thank you for your time. Please let me know if you have any